My weapon is a melody. I raise a hallelujah. Heaven comes to fight for me.
I'm gonna see in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive.
I want to speak to us this morning on the theme, the greatness of our God. And in doing so, I want us to have a new revelation, if I may use that term, of the God that we serve. You see, it is so easy, having come into the knowledge of Jesus Christ and being born of his Spirit. And as time goes by, we take so much for granted. Even God, at times, we take for granted. This morning, I am hoping that we would see him through a different pair of eyes, recognizing whom he really is, as much as we can through the word. And let that revelation bring about a difference in how we approach God, how we recognize God, and how we treat God. I really, really hope this will do this morning. Why? Far too often, whenever we find ourselves in severe adversity, we limit God as to what he can do on our behalf. When things are hunky-dory, oh, God is great, there is nothing that he can't do. He is the God of the impossible. He's a miracle-working God. But when things go wrong, and there's adversity in our lives, we tend to look at God through a different pair of eyes. We limit him as to what he can do on our behalf. Yes, we demonstrate faith in him, which is evidenced by our cries to him when we are in trouble. Because the fact that we pray is an indication that we have some level of faith in God. So our cries to God is evidence of that faith. However, when the situation we face may grow worse, as it does sometimes, as it does most times, that is before it gets better. How many of you have prayed about things and instead of it getting better, it gets worse before it gets better? When that happens, we begin to make baby steps into wonderland. We begin to wonder, when God? How God? Why God? And depending on the situation that we have before him, who God? Those are baby steps into wonderland. Should the intensity of the adversity increase as time goes on, we take giant steps into wonderland and we begin to wonder if God, will God, can God? Yes, can God? That's when the situation begins to look hopeless in our eyes. We wonder, can God? Let me say to us this morning, no matter what the situation may be, whatever we may be going through, how impossible it may seem, there is absolutely no question as can God. As children of God, we must never ever let any circumstance of life define the greatness of our God. Never. If God is the true God and only God, if your God is the true God and only God, the one who created the heavens and the earth and all that is therein, if your God is he who, according to John 1:1-3, is the Word that was in the beginning, the Word that was with God, and the Word that was God. That same Word that was in the beginning with God, if that is your God, and all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Verse 16, and that Word was made flesh and dwelt among men. If your God was manifested in Jesus, he is the great, great God, and there is nothing too hard for him to do. Put your hands together for this God that we serve. Don't let anything or anyone, not even the devil in hell, cause you to think otherwise. And he does that. He causes us to think otherwise when we are in difficulty that seems unbearable. Too often we think of God as a man in heaven, and as a result, we put a limit upon him. But God corrected that thought in his word even before we may have conceived the thought. In Numbers 23:19, Moses is very emphatic when he tells us that God is not a man. Let me say it again. It's there in the word. I know that he went on to say that he should lie. But the fact of the matter is that God is not a man. Even though at times we tend to think like that there is this great man that sits on a throne in heaven, having the same form as we have as men and women, and we think that he thinks like us. Let this thought be eradicated from our minds if we have been thinking like that forever. Hear what God says through the prophet Isaiah 55:8-9. He says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. Verse 9. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. We cannot equate God's thinking to ours. We cannot and should not and must not equate the way we think with the way God thinks. He has said it. His thoughts are not our thoughts. So through the prophet Isaiah 40:18, God is asking you this morning, he's asking me this morning, he's asking us this morning, to whom will you liken me and make me equal and compare me that we may be like? Can we liken him to anyone? Can we? But you know we do in our thoughts at times, because we want him to think the way we are thinking. Can he be equal to anyone or anything? To whom could we compare this God that we come into church and sing about? Who can we compare him with? He is the incomparable God, the unmovable God. There is no one like him, not in all the universe. There is no one like him. When God delivered Israel out of Egypt, having afflicted the Egyptians with 10 plagues, the last one being the death of the firstborn, God miraculously opened the Red Sea, allowing Moses and Israel to go through the Red Sea. And when Pharaoh tried to go through behind them, God closed the waters and drowned the entire army. Coming through that experience, in Genesis 15:11, Moses asked the question, "Who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like unto thee?" Moses could not fathom the greatness of God and the wonders that he did. Seeing what God had just done, he couldn't fathom this God. And he asked the question, "Who is like unto you, O God? Who is like unto you?" That, despite the fact that in Exodus 33:11 tells us that the Lord spake unto Moses face to face as a man unto his friend. Of course, face to face is not, it's not, what you call it, literal. No man can see God and live. But it was that kind of relationship that Moses had with God. Yet, he couldn't fathom this God. If Moses could not fathom the greatness of God, then how much more so would it have been if he, Moses, had the kind of insight as we can have today, given the increase of knowledge as a result of technology? Moses didn't have a clue, even though he saw the miraculous hand of God, the workings of God. He didn't have a clue of the greatness of this God as we can have today. Allow me some time to tell you a little of this greatness of the God that we serve. God is revealed in the Bible. That is his inspired word to mankind, as an infinite, eternal, self-existent being who is the first cause of all that is. That is to say, there never was a moment when God was not God. Now, our finite minds, I understand, can't comprehend that because we are a product of time and everything is according to time. When, how, where. But God, let's even though our minds are finite, let's try to understand that God always was. There was no beginning with God. There was no ending with God. And this is what confuses a lot of people who cannot accept this God by faith, as Hebrews says. He that cometh unto God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that believe. We can't be like the agnostics and want to have evidence to know that God is God, even though the agnostics are very stupid people. David calls them fools because there's evidence that God exists all around us. When we look up into the skies, there is so much evidence. Even the people that peer through the telescopes, what you call them, the astrologers, the astronomers, even they who would not believe in God are foolish. Because when you look out there, what you can see, only the handiwork of God. But before I go on, let me say this. There never was a moment when God did not exist. He is a self-existent God. He exists in himself always. So even though our finite minds cannot conceptualize this because we are a product of time, Moses affirmed this truth in a prayer documented in Psalm 91 and 2. There he states, Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or even thou hast formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. In other words, God existed eternally and infinitely before creating the finite universe. He's above all, independent of all, and prior to all that have been created in heaven and on earth. Paul, the apostle of Jesus, writing to Timothy in 1 Timothy 6, says of God, who only hath immortality, dwelling in the light which no man can approach unto, whom no man had seen, nor can see, to whom be honor and the power everlasting. Amen. It must be sealed, signed, and delivered as so. The term who only has immortality expresses the transcendence of God. That is to say, he is different and independent of his creation, whether it be man, whether it be angel, whether it be spirit. Yes, even spirit. Jesus said God is spirit, but he transcends even spirit beings. So he is way, way above, beyond. Oh, I wish I had the words to express it. Anyway, he's independent of even spirit beings, physical or material things. So God must not be placed on the same level as humans or any other being he has created. And there are times when we want to place God at those levels. We want to reduce God to our way of thinking, how we should do things, when he should do things, why he should do things. Listen, let us catch ourselves. Let's catch ourselves and understand who this God is. We are speaking of the greatness of God that we sometimes misrepresent by our insensitive thoughts, actions, and behaviors when going through adversities. Things are always nice when we're going through nice times. But when the rubber meets the road and the going gets tough, we start to think about this God and reduce him to our way of thinking. Well, why God can't do it like this? No. We want to understand he is beyond us. His thoughts are not our thoughts. Sometimes we even blame God for our misfortunes. The world does it. Some catastrophe happens, what they call it? An act of God. Is that really so? Does that line up with the Word of God? We question God among other things. But hear what James says in 1:17. Every good gift, every perfect gift is from above and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variableness nor shadow of a turning. If I understand my Bible, every means every, and good means good. And if my Bible tells me every good gift and every perfect gift comes down from the Father of light, in whom there is no variableness, no shadow of turning, how can I attribute something that is evil, something that is woeful to God? How can we? He's a good, good God. He's good all the time. No matter what happens here upon earth. When I hear people talk about not believing God because of all the famine in the world and all the murders and all the abortions, I spoke about this some time ago. It's because Satan is God of this world. God sent his son, Jesus Christ, to establish his kingdom here upon earth. I'm not going into it. Listen to the message. So let us stop attributing the negative things that happen in our lives to this God that we read about in James, that every good gift and every perfect gift comes down from him. And James says he's the Father of lights. What lights? Well, he's called the Father of lights because in the beginning of creation, he spoke into existence the sun, the moon, and the stars. They're all lights up there to give light to planet Earth. Hear what the prophet Isaiah in 40:26 exhorts. He says, lift up your eyes on high and behold who had created these things that bringeth out their host by number. Listen to this. He calls them all by names, by the greatness of his might, for that he is strong in power, not one faileth. Meaning not missing one. Every single one. He knows them by name. He can call them by name without faulting in any way. Not one. This is in reference to the stars that they could see. When the prophet Isaiah told Israel to lift up their eyes, that is in relation to what they could see. But this morning, we are going to look a little, just a little, of the greatness of God through scientific findings as a result of increased technology today. Isaiah was talking about the stars that he could see. There was no means of seeing beyond what the natural eye can see. But because of technology, today, we can Google, which is what I did. So I'm going to give you some information. Don't think Pastor is this bright boy. I didn't get to that class in school. But Google is there, and you can get information from Google. Listen to some information concerning the greatness of the God that we serve, the God that we want to limit when we are going through situations and we can't understand how come answers are not coming when we want it. There are 100 billion galaxies in space, and more are being discovered with a potential of 200 billion galaxies. One galaxy, listen to this, one galaxy contains 100,000 million stars. You want me to go over that again? There are 100 billion galaxies in space, and one galaxy contains 100,000 million stars. You could do the math. I can't. And we just read that He, God, calls them all by name without missing one. This is not a man sitting down on a throne in heaven that we accuse sometimes of not doing what we want him to do. This is not a man sitting on a throne that we say, God, you must do this for us. Right now, God. You see how crazy we could be? Could you imagine we, smaller than a speck of sand on the seashore, in the eyes of God, telling God that He must do something now? And emphasizing, right now, Lord, right now. Who do we think we are? So when we talk about the galaxies and the millions and millions and the billions, we are speaking of the greatness of the God that we so often put a limit on when adversity comes for long durations. It is documented that astronomers have discovered one of the most distant planets known. I don't know, you must have read about the Hubble telescope that they have in the air that could peer into outer darkness, where they are finding unimaginable things. So they found this planet, a gas giant about 13,000 light years from Earth. Pastor, you believe in those things? I don't believe in them, but I don't have any reason to doubt them, because this Bible has more science in it than science could ever imagine. We like to put down scientific things because we can't understand it and it doesn't say it in the Bible, because we don't have an understanding of the Bible. When we read in the book of Genesis, in the beginning, God. And then we see that he spoke into existence, let there be, and there was. We see that in one line. But in the beginning, God is separated by eons of years before God decided that he will do something with this ball that he created and leave floating in the air called earth, that he was going to do something about it. So it's no question of the age of creation. We can't come to think in terms of the earth being created 6,000 years ago. No. In the beginning, God. There always was God, and he created. When he came to the question of earth, that's a different story. He says, well, look, why do all this thing and waste it? Let's do something with this planet called Earth, and we're not going into that as yet. So we have to understand that science has some truth in it, not all, but it has some truth in it. And when we talk about something being 13,000 light years from Earth, they know how they measure that time. We are not to know that. We could just read it. Either we believe it or we don't believe it. As far as I'm concerned, I believe what God says, that in the last days, knowledge shall be increased. Okay? And Lord, oh my God, it's increasing more and more every day. So let's go back to the light years. This gas giant, about 13,000 light years from Earth, light travels at the rate of 6 million miles a year. That's a light year. A speed of 6 million miles a year. That would mean if the planet was to fall to Earth, traveling at the rate of 6 million miles a year, and that planet is 13,000 light years away from Earth, it means that it will take 13,000 years to reach Earth. 13,000 years to reach Earth. Our minds cannot comprehend the vastness of the universe. That is the point I want to make. Our minds cannot comprehend the vastness of the universe. But hear what Isaiah 40:12 tells us about this great, great God that we serve. Who hath measured the waters in the hollow of his hand? Who had meted out the heavens with a span of his hand? We are talking about a big God that we serve. Not only is he a big God, but he's a great God. And he is not a man. So we should stop treating him like that. We should stop thinking of him like that. We should stop expecting him to behave as we behave and do the things that we will do. How many times people come up against us and we want God to kill them? And you know what God does? Right in our face. When we're killing our own selves over them, he blesses them. Because my ways are not your ways. my thoughts and not your thoughts. So is it any wonder that God asked the question through Isaiah 40:25? To whom then would you like me? Or shall I be equal? Who are we going to liken God to? Unto whom? We liked him unto ourselves because we expect him to think like us. We wonder if God can. You know, I did that once, you know. I told God, I believe you can do anything, but you see this? I can't see how you could do that. I can't see. You want me to tell you what it was about? I was in a relationship when I got married, when I got saved. Sorry, darling. I was in a relationship when I got saved. And I had a 180-degree turnabout. Everything that I used to do, which was everything, I stopped doing. And I was in this relationship, so I stopped doing that too. And the person will not leave me. Will not leave me. I understand why, but she would not leave me. And I went to the pastor, asking him what to do. Well, among other things, he says, pray. And I looked at him and said, you don't know the person I am talking about. I don't even believe even God can do that. And he looked at me and smiled. Well, let me tell you, it was done. Because there is nothing impossible or too hard for God to do. Not only did he undo that, but he do this. You must let God work, huh? Let God work. Anyway, we use the masculine pronoun, he, when referring to God. But I want to assure us this morning that as Moses said in Numbers 23:19, he is not a man. God is not a man. We can go around telling God he must do this, that, or the other. Even telling him how to do things, when to do things, why he must do things. I hear that all the time. I hear it all the time. And I think people are mad, believe me. I was once so. I was once mad. Listen to some other scientific statistics concerning the greatness of God, the God that we serve. Some of you may know this one. You don't have to go to Google to find that out. The sun is 93 million miles, or 147.25 kilometers, for those of you who are in the new age, from the earth. Now, that's just a statistics to us, because we can't fathom 93 million miles. It's beyond our imagination. Yet, that sun lightens up the earth so bright from 93 million miles away. The sun lightens up the earth so brightly that some of us have to wear shades in order to go out in the sun. What kind of torchlight could shine 93 million miles and turn night into day? Burn people. Hot. The moon is the same 93 miles away from the sun. The moon has no light of its own. From 93 million miles, or 147.25 kilometers away, it reflects light from the sun. The sun shines on the moon to give it light, and that light on the moon travels to Earth, which is, what I have here, 238,855 miles. And in full moon, you can pick up a pin on the ground. Are we understanding about this God that we serve? His greatness? I mean, what mind could have put these things together? What mind? Surely not a human mind. These things did not just happen by chance. They were created. They were created out of nothing. How could you take nothing? You can't take nothing and make a red ant. Far less what we are talking about here. But the God that we serve took nothing. It was just He. And He made. And He didn't use hammer and nails. Let there be. And there was. Loved ones, stop behaving as we behave in the eyes of this great, great, all-seeing, all-knowing, all-powerful God. Let us understand we are not dealing with a man. And this great, 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 to the nth degree God looked down on the earth that He created, where there are millions of people. And He says, hey, I want you. I want you to be my child. I am going to redeem you, not with silver and gold, but by the precious blood of my Son, Jesus Christ. I'm going to pull you up out of the earth, out of the kingdom of the world, and put you into my kingdom. I have chosen you. You have not chosen me. This great, great, great God. Shouldn't we think seriously about how we treat this God? Shouldn't we think seriously of how we behave in the eyes of this God? Shouldn't we think of how we think about this God, the thoughts that we allow to pass through our minds and we entertain and carry them through? Should we? So these things didn't just happen by chance. This great, great God that we speak about, He spoke it into existence. Psalm 33:6. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the hosts of them by the breath of his mouth. We are serving a great, great, great God. We have been redeemed by a great, great, great God. Let us purpose in our hearts to serve this great, great, great God in the way that he would have us serve him. Not how we think we should serve him. Not how it pleases us to serve him. Not serve him by what we feel nice about, but serve him according to his word as we are led by his Spirit. Where am I? So the earth was created by God and it's wronged. We're going back to school. The earth is wronged, right? Is the earth wronged? The earth is wronged. Okay, so let's do some imagining now. Let's imagine a ball. Okay? And before we go there, this ball called Earth, one thing science have not been able to do is to measure its weight. But it must be real heavy. It must be real heavy. And this ball is floating and traveling in the air. Not falling anywhere. But it's just floating. And it spins. Before we go on spinning, before we spin, the ball, if something is on top of the ball, it's okay. But what about Australia? How come we standing up because we're on top? Australia is down below and they're still standing on top. Imagine a ball. Put things on a ball and turn it around. You don't think it'll fall? Things will fall off? Can anything fall off the earth? No, you have to have jet propulsion to get off the earth. But it's a ball. It's heavy. It's floating and nothing falling off. We're still talking about the greatness of God. In addition to that, the earth spins at the rate of 1,000 miles or 1,609.34 kilometers per hour. The earth is spinning like that. And it travels around the sun at 67,000 miles or 107,826 kilometers per hour. So this ball that we're on is spinning thousands of miles per hour and we're not falling off. Well, Pastor, you should know, you should know that is gravity. Gravity. But where gravity come from? How did gravity get in the earth to hold us down? Who created it? What kind of mind thought about all this before putting it into effect? God is a God of plan. It didn't just happen by chance. He had it all in his mind, what he was going to do. And he conceived everything down to the minute detail of every single thing, from a red ant right up to the biggest thing, an animal. All in his mind. When you talk about the human body, we have a doctor here, we have a doctor down the back here, how it's made up. Oh my God. God is so great. I have read that if the speed of the earth drops to 29,000 miles per hour, drops by 29,000 miles an hour, we will all lift off the earth. So who conceived this accurate speed that will keep everything anchored on this ball that is floating and spinning and moving around the sun? Who could have conceived that? And when the astronomers look up and they see this unimaginable thing, they can't conceptualize like we how all this could be. But they refuse to believe that there is a creator called God. So what do they say? It all happened with a big bang. Now, what bang? Nothing can bang. Something had to bang. So who created this something that banged? Only a fool will say in his heart, there is no God. But thank God, we chose, without seeing, to believe that God is God. With that kind of spinning, we should all be giddy. But we don't feel a thing because of the constant speed. Gravity keeps us anchored. Why am I telling you all this? These things emphasize God's wisdom. It emphasizes his greatness. It emphasizes his majesty. And it emphasizes his creative power. And speaking of Jesus, we read in Colossians 1:16 and 17, for by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether it be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him. Verse 17, and he is before all things, and by him all things consist. That means he's holding it all together, and his name is Jesus. That is the God that we are talking about. So in closing this morning, since the God that we serve is so great a God, and I barely skimmed the surface, is there anything too hard for the Lord to do in your life? Is there anything too hard for this God to do in your life? Should we not trust him with all our hearts and not lean to our own understanding? Shouldn't we just acknowledge him in all that we do and allow him, as he promised in his word, to direct our path? Should we not believe him when the enemy puts doubt in our minds, contrary to what he says, should he not be loved? Should this great, great God not be loved? Should he not be honored? Should he not be feared? And should he not be obeyed? Should he not be worshipped? If your answer to these questions is no, I'm going to ask you, please, to remain seated. If your answer is yes, I'm going to ask you to stand. And we are going to give this great, great God the glory that is due his name by worshiping him, glorifying him, magnifying him. I want with every hand and every heart lifted up to God, let us pour our heart out to God in recognition of who he is this morning. Let's sing this chorus.
It's a privilege to worship you, Maker
Yes, He is a great, great God. Oh, there is none like unto Him. There is none like unto Him, not in the heavens, not in the earth, not beneath the earth. Nowhere is there one like unto you, O God. We praise your holy, wonderful name. Hallelujah. 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 Oh, let's worship Him. Let's worship Him. Hallelujah. 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 Wonderful, glorious Master. Oh, let's worship Him. He is worthy. He is worthy. Just love Him this morning. Let's pour our hearts out to Him this morning. He is worthy. He is worthy. He is worthy.
Lord, we
While we are standing in His presence this morning, you came in here this morning. You may not even know why, if this is your first time. You may not even know why you came. Yes, someone would have invited you. But there is a bigger one behind that someone who moved upon you, that you would respond affirmatively and be here. So if you're here this morning and you don't know this great, great God that we serve, you have never had that one-to-one experience with Him. The experience, and it's more than an experience, but suffice it to say, it's an experience. You have never had that experience that Jesus Himself in John 3 calls being born of His Spirit. You have never had that experience of a new birth, this birth of the very Spirit of God inside of your spirit, taking you out of the kingdom of darkness and transcending you into the kingdom of God. You are still so far away from God, although He loves you so desperately that He gave His life for you. All He wants of you is to take Him into your heart and make Him your Savior. Make Him your Lord. And He will do with you and for you like nothing else or no one else can ever do. He will save you from the road to eternal damnation on which we all go upon, and bring you into His life, a life eternal. If you're here this morning and you have never had that experience, a personal one-to-one experience of being born of the Spirit of God, I want to help you with a simple prayer. It's a simple prayer. It can be prayed in a million different ways. It's not about the prayer. It's about your heart wanting this God to come into your life and making you a child of God. You're here this morning and you want to give Jesus Christ the opportunity to come into your heart and make you a child of God. Just right where you are, raise your hand. I'll help you with a simple prayer. And when you walk out of this place, you will never be the same person that when you came. Is there anyone, any takers this morning? Anyone that will say, yes, I want Jesus into my life? In the balcony? Under the balcony? Up front? Well, I am trusting with all my heart that every one of us are born of the Spirit of God. But just in the event that you heard this morning and you chose not to be, I want you to know that your decision will keep you out of the kingdom of heaven and you would remain in the kingdom of darkness. I pray, God, that you would have another choice after this morning. So God bless you richly. You may be seated.